Hello beautiful people, welcome to my YouTube channel. It's your girl Kati-Culture. Guys, today I'll be bringing you the transatlantic slave trade part 2. Remember in my previous video I presented to you the transatlantic slave trade part 1, which I didn't state the specific port when the slave trade was carried out. Like, I did not say the particular locations in Africa where the slave trade was carried out. So in this part 2, I'll be bringing you how the slaves were transported, their locations in Africa, where the slaves were mostly gotten in Africa. That's what I will bring into you part 2. Then I will bring into you the various colonial masters that were more interested in this slavery and in this transatlantic slave trade. So guys, before you continue watching this video, please like, subscribe and share. Click on the notification bell so that you won't miss out in any of my videos. So guys, you can call it a documentary or you can call it a video. All is that I am bringing you how the transatlantic slave trade was carried out in Africa. So guys, let me give you a brief introduction again about the transatlantic slave trade before getting into more details how it was done in Africa. So, the transatlantic slave trade, also known as the triangular trade, was a system of slavery where millions of enslaved Africans were forcibly transported across the Atlantic Ocean to the Americas. The trade operated from the 15th to the 19th century with various European powers, including Portugal, Spain, Britain, France, and the Netherlands. Below is a brief history how the transatlantic slave trade was operated. The coast of African rule. The coast of Africa played a significant role in the transatlantic slave trade. European slave traders established fort castles and trading ports along the coast, particularly in West Africa, to facilitate the trade. Regions and ports involving in the transatlantic slave trade were as follows: Gold Coast, present-day Ghana. Gold Coast was a major hub for the slave trade, with forts like Cape Coast Castle and Elmina Castle serving as key holding centers. Slave Coast, Benin and Nigeria. The Slave Coast was another significant region, with ports like Owada and Badegry playing important role in the trade. Senegambia, Senegal and Gambia, present day. The Senegambia region was also involved in the slave trade, with ports like St. Louis and Goria Island serving as key departure points. The impact of the slave trade. Depopulation. The slave trade led to the depopulation of many coastal communities, as millions of people were forcibly taken from their homes. Economic disruption. The slave trade disrupted local economies as the focus shifted from traditional industries like agriculture to trade to the slave trade. Cultural destruction. The slave trade also led to the destruction of local cultures, as enslaved Africans were forced to abandon their traditions and adopt their new European captors' tradition. The legacy of the transatlantic slave trade continued to impact the coast of Africa and the African diaspora today. Many of the forts and castles built during the slave trade era still stand, serving as reminders of the brutal history of the trade. effort to preserve this site and honor the memories of those who were enslaved are ongoing. The slave trade between Nigeria and the UK is a complex and dark history that spans centuries. A brief historical background. The transatlantic slave trade, which operated from the 15th to the 19th century, involved the forced transportation of millions of enslaved Africans, including Nigerians, to the Americas. European powers, including Britain, France, and Portugal, established forts and trading posts along the Nigerian coast to facilitate the trade. Nigerian coast. The Nigerian coast, particularly the Bight of Biafra and the Slave Coast, were major hubs for the slave trade. Enslaved Nigerians were forcibly taken from their homes and sold to European traders. Middle Passage. The Middle Passage was the brutal journey across the Atlantic Ocean where enslaved Africans were subjected to inhuman conditions including overcrowding, diseases, and violence. UK involvement. The UK was a significant player in the slave trade with British ships and traders transporting enslaved Africans to the Americas. The British government and slave traders established the Royal African Company, which monopolized the slave trade in West Africa. One million slaves was estimated to have been exported in Nigeria in the 19th century. 46 million people, approximately 46 million worldwide, are living in modern-day slavery. Let me explain a little about the West African coast slave route. The West African coast, particularly the Bight of Biafra and the Slave Coast, were major hubs for slave trade. The Nigerian coast, including the Niger Delta and Cross River, were key areas for slave trade. Slave trading posts. European powers established slave trading posts and fought along the coast such as ones in Badagry, Lagos, and Calabar. Villages affected by slave trade. Badagry, Lagos. Badagry, Lagos was a major slave trading post and many enslaved Africans were taken from the surrounding villages. Calabar, Cross River. Calabar was a significant slave trading center and many enslaved Africans were taken from the surrounding villages. Bonny, Rivers State. Bonny was a major slave trading post and many enslaved Africans were taken from the surrounding villages. Obobo, Rivers State. Obobo was another significant slave trading post and many enslaved Africans were taken from the surrounding villages. Ekiti, Akwa Ibom. Ekiti was a major slave trading post and many enslaved Africans were taken from the surrounding. Some specific villages that were affected by the slave trade include Agbara, Delta State. Agbara was a village that was raided by slave traders and many of its inhabitants were taken into slavery. The next is the Ogbo, Ondo State. Ogbo was a village that was affected by the slave trade and many of its inhabitants were taken into slavery. We go down to the next, Ibeno, Akwa Ibom. Same thing happened. We move down to Ekpeyong, Cross River. Same thing happened. Most of these villages were raided and inhabitants taken into slavery. The slave trade had a devastating impact on the villages mentioned above and the communities affected by it. Many people were forcibly taken from their homes and their cultures and traditions were disrupted. The slave trade also led to the depopulation of many areas as people were taken away to sold into slavery. We move down to coastal forts and castles. European powers built forts and castles along the coast, such as the Elmina Castle and the Cape Coast Castle, to facilitate the slave trade. Slave market. Salanga, Panga, and Sapele were major slave markets where enslaved Africans were sold to Europeans. Transportation. Slaves were marched from the hinterland to the coastal forts and castles where they were shipped to Europe or the Americans. Wow. Let me now give you the slave trade in the Gold Coast, the various European powers that were involved. Portuguese. The Portuguese were the first Europeans to establish trade relations with the Gold Coast, arriving in 1471. They built the Elmina Castle, which became a major hub for the slave trade. We move down to Dutch. The Dutch established their presence in the Gold Coast in the 17th century, building forts and trading posts, including the Dutch fort at Elmina. We move down to the next, the British. The British established their presence in the Gold Coast in the 17th century, building forts and trading posts, including Cape Coast Castle. Danes. The Danes established their presence in the Gold Coast in the 17th century, building forts and trading posts, including the Danish Fort Christiansborg. So guys, before you go, please like, subscribe and share. Click on the notification bell so that you won't miss out in any of my videos. Thank you for watching. Thank you for liking. Thank you for commenting. I do not take your engagement for granted. Thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for more updates on my channel. Remember, it's your girl, Kati-Culture. Bye-bye for now. Love you all. Oh, guys, that treatment was a treatment nobody will want to go through. Let's say no to slavery and slave trade. Let's say no to human trafficking. Let's say no to oppression. Let's say no to depression. Let's say no to colonization. Stay tuned. Bye-bye. Love you all.